Hey, what's up everybody, this is Huts, and here are some actually useful tips for No Man's Sky. Now, most of the tutorial videos that I've seen out there today look like they were made for about preschool level game players. In this video, we're gonna bypass all that junk and dive right on to the seriously useful tips that everyone should know in the game. Now, the first thing that I noticed when I jumped into the game is how laggy and choppy it was. I thought, well, maybe it's just loading, maybe I'll give it some time, but then I realized that the game was preset to be on 30 frames per second. Now, when I bumped it up to 60 frames per second, everything was butter smooth. So on 30 frames per second, I was getting about 10 frames, but on 60 frames per second, most of the time I was getting full 60. I would definitely recommend jumping up to 60 frames per second, assuming that your computer can handle it. Now, one more incredible tip before we jump into actual gameplay is the fact that you cannot Alt-Tab out of the game and reload the game by clicking in the icon on the bottom bar. Now, this is specific for Windows users. If you Alt-Tab out, you're basically stuck. You're broken. If you go to change something, look something up on the internet, you can't get back into the game unless you do this one simple tip. If you Control-Alt-Delete and open up your task manager, locate No Man's Sky under Apps and click the down arrow, right-click on the subtask and say Bring to Front. This will now load your game back up, and you can jump right back in without having to reboot and losing everything because you didn't save it. Now that we are jumping on into the game, the first thing that you might notice is that you're kind of sluggish. Now, there is one trick to get the maximum amount of speed while you're walking around the planet. This is called the melee jump. In order to activate the melee jump, hold shift to start running, then press Q to do a melee, and immediately when you melee, you want to hold the spacebar button and launch off the ground. Now, this will keep you moving at the speed you were going when you meleeed, which is the fastest possible speed you can get. Use this trick to quickly jump between resources, quest markers, what have you. Now, moving on to survival, one of the most obvious ways of collecting money is mining resources. But as you know, most planets either have radiation, or they're too cold, or they're too hot, so you can actually only stay out mining for a certain amount of time. A huge helpful tip is to make a mining pocket. If you mine into, say, a column of gold, and you go directly to the center of that column, you'll make a sort of cave around you, and inside of any kind of cave, you will see that there is stabilization of some sort, or whether it's heat stabilization, radiation stabilization, you will no longer be affected by the elements on that planet. Now, from here, you can start to mine from the inside out so that you keep this cave structure and can mine for a lot longer. Another really helpful hint while you're mining is the mining recharge. Your tool will start to overheat as you're mining. However, you don't need to wait for the overheat bar to get all the way down to 0. As long as it starts to cool off in any sort of way possible, you can start mining again and the bar actually starts over from 0. This will save you some time. So once again, essentially, as soon as it starts to cool off, it is 100% cool and you can start firing immediately. Now, in the same vein, if you're mining in space with your cannons, I would suggest doing a tap shoot instead of holding the button down to overheat your cannons. If you tap fast enough, you can just about fire at the maximum fire rate, and your cannons won't overheat at all. Number 5 on the list is don't forget about the animals. While you're around going from gold pillar to iridium pillar to whatever thing you're mining, try and scan all the animals. There is usually a very large cash prize for having discovered every single animal on the planet. Now, do note, you can discover different animals of the same species, which won't count towards the prize. And don't forget that plants and rocks and fauna and things like that don't count towards it. Also, don't forget about birds and the aquatic animals. Those need to be scanned as well. Now, there are definite tips and tricks in order to get the most money the fastest, and mining is actually not one of them, but I'm gonna handle that in a different video. Now, you might be wondering, how the hell do I get enough money to buy these really, really expensive ships and multi-tools? Well, the beauty is just that. There's a lot of free stuff out there. If you are patient and you look for transmissions, specifically transmissions, they will sometimes lead you to crashed ships. These crashed ships are absolutely free ships, and more often than not, they will have more inventory slots than you currently have now. Even if you find a ship though, and you don't want to repair it back to working order, you can still transfer over to the ship, dismantle everything inside of the ship, and get all the sometimes rare materials that you'll get from it, and then just jump back into your other ship and take off. And number 7, last but not least, this game can get very repetitive, and at some point you might be thinking, what the heck hell am I supposed to be doing? What is the point of this game? Just don't forget that story plots will be unlocked the more you warp. They will naturally happen if you keep warping to new solar systems. So without spoiling anything, keep warping, people. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of actually useful tips in No Man's Sky. Once again, I am Huts, and I make a variety of content on my channel. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.